Hey guys, this is Kyle, aka Vulcan Wolverine. It is September 10th, 2018. Um, and I woke up about, I just woke up about an hour and a half ago with my back pulsating in pain, and my frontal lobe feels like it's just been cooked like a filet. Um, but I have a lot of important information that I want to get out. I might have to break it up in two videos because I really wanted to go through an important Hagman report video with Kevin Shipp. I know that there's so much information out there, about our situation, targeted individuals, and gang stalking, and different whistleblowers out there that I haven't looked into Kevin Shipp much, but I started, watching some of his presentations, on the military-industrial complex and the corrupt CIA, um, and how he was targeted. Him and his family were targeted. So I have a lot of important information to get through. Um, I also, before I start, I'm going to say a prayer because my head just it hurts so bad. I'm having trouble thinking, and I almost I put off making these videos. Like I was feeling a lot better when I started this new platform, but my attackers have really been pounding me with microwaves, um, and I've started to get kind of reticent. I don't even know if I'm using that word right, but I've been I'm like, well, I should wait till I feel better to make a video, but I don't know if that's really going to happen. I'm going to be trying to, you work with some better defenses and things like that. But I think I've just got to do the best that I can until death or brain death, or that we do this. I'm just going to try and go through the information as best I can, mirror important stuff that has to do with us, on my videos, so y'all can go to those links. So I'm going to start with a prayer first. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, in the name of Jesus Christ, dear Lord, please give us miracles today and every day. Please help me to get information across that is helpful to help non-target individuals understand what is happening with us, that we're being murdered and tortured, and to give a good foundation to TIs, people dealing with this, to give them a good foundation of information where that they can know what's happening to us, know where our country went wrong and where kind of a lot of governments went wrong, and just please give us help from people who aren't directly targeted to help save our lives, and bless these whistleblowers that keep coming out and talking about the severe treason by many agencies that aren't even necessarily federal agencies, some private agencies. But just give us miracles. Please give me strength to do this video in a way where I get more information out and I help our cause, and that we can bring this to a close in whatever way, whatever miracle you're going to create to end this, to stop this torture on us. Because if a lot of us can't take it much longer, our bodies can't take this. You know the pain that we feel, and you can create balance in this, God. Thank you for all the good things that we've had happen recently, all the wins, all the people, understanding how corrupt things are, so that these things can come out, even in the mainstream media. Thank you for those miracles of the mainstream media saying microwave. Please just give us strength, Lord, and just give us miracles. Help us to get through, what we need to get through, and to give us our lives back, God. Um, Thank you in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, in the name of Jesus Christ. All right, guys. Before I start, I wanted to. This is a this is a page from SoundCloud, and this is a beautiful targeted individual that I know named Claudia, and she creates her own music. Like she basically produces like all the music, and she's a great singer. And I just wanted to tell y'all about her talent. And you can go to SoundCloud and you can go to Claudia Schuyler, Claudia, Skyler. Just put that when you go to SoundCloud.com, put in Claudia Schuyler, and she has a bunch of free music. It's free. She just wants people to come and see her music. So, I'm going to be trying to do this more with targeted individuals who have, talents that they're trying to get out there. So please go check out her music. My favorite right now is These Days, and she just has the voice of an angel. And it's more than just sad that she's being targeted like this. That someone so beautiful and creative is being targeted like this. But I just wanted to tell you all about, her music before we started. So go to SoundCloud.com and put in Claudia Schuyler, and it's free to listen to all of her music. So check it out. Okay, so I'm going to get started. First, I want to just play this real quick. Is the government still running a mind control program? I'm going to start with this. Then I've got a really long, it's a really long Hagman report with Kevin Shipp. But the information is just so crucial that I want to mirror it here. And so y'all will have the link. And then a lot of things that he's saying about the massive military industrial complex and the shadow government and the deep state, which are two different things. But it relates to our situation a lot, how the military industrial complex, the deep state, has just gone insane, and there's so much secrecy, and they can keep people's mouths shut. They can keep people's mouths shut through I can't remember the name, but he'll go through it. But like they have to promise, they sign agreements, I think it's called, secrecy agreements. They sign secrecy agreements. Like, so the people microwaving me now, they can't come out and say anything about this. I don't think they would anyway. But if they do, they can go to prison. They can be financially ruined and everything like that. So once they get into bed with these military industrial complex agencies and private corporations, they sign secrecy agreements. And if they do come out and tell anything, or if somebody's in a certain agency and they find out about this and they want to speak out, they want to whistleblow on it, their lives will be destroyed. And Kevin Shipp, he came out and talked about a lot of the corruption. He talked about his family being targeted. And I personally, he doesn't come out and just say it. He says that, the CIA did try and poison him and his family with neurotoxins and things like that. I personally think that there was directed energy attacks involved on him and his family also. But he doesn't come out and say that. Some things he still does not talk about, and he agrees with the CIA not to talk about. But let me start with this video first. I'm going to just try and get through it. It may be a long video, guys, so you may have to watch in 2 parts. And then I have more information that I want to talk about, the Directed Energy Professional Society. I got some good information from Patrick, or you might know him on the calls as Inca Rhodes. He's a great researcher, and so I'm going to be going through a lot more information that he wants to get out there because he's just a great researcher. He puts the dots together. And I want to talk about a couple of things. I might not be able to get to him in this video because the Hagman report, I forgot his name already, Kevin Shipp, it's a presentation, is very long. So let's get started. On this.
In 1951, a Swiss pharmaceutical company developed 40,000 LSD tablets. In the midst of Cold War paranoia, the USA bought the supply immediately, fearing the Russians would buy it first and spike the US water supply. This single purchase launched a top-secret CIA operation designated MKULTRA. This program tested the effects of LSD and experimented with mind control methods throughout the 50s and 60s. The program was officially shut down in 1973. But has the US government actually stopped practicing mental manipulation? MKUltra first came to light in 1975, when Congress launched an investigation into CIA practices. Although CIA Director Richard Helms had ordered all the operation files to be destroyed, a request under the Freedom of Information Act uncovered 20,000 documents that detailed MKUltra's murky activities. MKUltra's tests took place in at least 80 institutions, including 44 colleges, universities, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. Participants from 185 private researchers were also used. Most test subjects were experimented on without their knowledge. In some cases, heroin addicts were enticed to participate with the promise of being paid in heroin. The ultimate goal was to exert mind control over victims in order to get confessions out of them, or worse. Temple University psychiatry professor Dr. Richard Kluft says the use of hypnotized assassins is plausible, and the US government has researched the possibility in the past. The US government's use of unwilling test subjects resurfaced in 1994, when the Senate Committee for Veterans released information about servicemen during World War II who were tricked or forced into mustard gas and lewisite testing. More recently, soldiers during the Gulf War were subject to the Department of Defense's man-break tests. Soldiers would be exposed to chemical weapons to determine what exposure level would kill or break a man. Some believe that government mind control is not limited to the military. Actress Roseanne Barr has been outspoken about entertainers being used as puppets for years. When asked about why celebrities don't typically speak out about important political issues, Barr said, "It's also a big culture of mind control. MKUltra mind control rules in Hollywood." Pop sensations Michael Jackson, Britney Spears and Miley Cyrus have all been linked to MKUltra mind control at some point. In 2012, independent news organization Truth Out reported that the US government forced Guantanamo Bay prisoners to take mind-altering drugs. Inmates would be handed sedatives and told that they were candy. Many were subject to routine injections of the drug Haldol, which was developed in the 1960s and is used on psychiatric patients. Side effects include suicidal behavior. Guantanamo Bay Detention Camp is still open and home to 122 prisoners. In his 2015 State of the Union address, President Barack Obama said his biggest regret was not shutting down the camp back in 2009. An executive order prohibiting drug experimentation on human subjects without consent was issued in 1976. The order mandated that any test subject must have a witness from a disinterested party present during the experiment. Other orders were put in place 5 years later to eliminate any and all human experimentation. However, in June 2015, the Guardian newspaper published a leaked CIA document that permits the director of the CIA to approve, modify, or disapprove all proposals pertaining to human subject research made by the government. With the CIA's new ability to essentially eliminate any and all human experimentation. However, in June 2015, the Guardian newspaper published a leaked CIA document that permits the director of the CIA to approve, modify, or disapprove all proposals pertaining to human subject research made by the government. With the CIA's new ability to essentially set the laws on human experimentation, has America truly seen the last of MKUltra?
Still going on.
The CIA claims that the Senate review misrepresents the enhanced interrogation program. The agency insists that the use of torture was necessary to obtain unique and otherwise unavailable intelligence. The CIA says the information gained through torture saved lives.
Okay. Alright guys, so, and I do want to just add in there, and I put it on another one of my videos, that the waiving of informed consent rules for non-consensual human experimentation, these rules that agencies go by are the same as they were after World War II, which is basically if it's a high up enough agency with a high up enough clearance, which they're giving those clearances to private corporations now, if they decide somebody can be experimented on without their consent, then it's okay. And it's not okay, it's actually treason, but they have these like little private rules that go against the Constitution that they act by, which is just treason. Anything that goes against the Constitution is illegal because it is the supreme law of the land. Our Constitution, no matter what is happening in our country right now, which has gone, I don't want to say a cuss word, but it's gone insane, those things are illegal because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Kevin Shipp says that. I don't know if I started a part. I'm going to go back to the beginning of his presentation and just play the whole thing through so everybody can hear his credentials and everything. Since it's going to be long anyway, let's just hear the whole thing. I will be jumping in from time to time, but I am just kind of, he's putting it out in a PowerPoint presentation. A lot of the things that he's talking about in general, about the military-industrial complex and these, intelligence contractors and then defense contractors. So there's many strata of different contractors that are involved in stuff like what's happening to us, this torture, experimentation, slow kill, destruction of our lives. So I do want to I'll start at the beginning. Let's just start it off, because having to go through his credentials and everything like that, we really do need to be listening to what Kevin Shipp says, because I think he still is a target individual, and they were trying to put poison in his environment and actually made like a lot of damage to him.
Welcome to this edition of the Hagman Report. Doug Hagman, Joe Hagman together, the premier father-son investigative reporting team, broadcasting proudly on Global Star Radio Network and Blog Talk Radio, also seen live on YouTube as well. And Kevin Shipp, the former CIA officer and anti-terrorism expert, had held several high-level positions in the CIA. He was assigned as a protective agent for the director of the Central Intelligence. Imagine that. Counterintelligence investigator, team leader protecting sensitive CIA assets from assassination, manager of high-risk counterterrorism center protective operations, lead instructor for members of allied governments, internal staff, security investigator, and polygraph examiner tasked with protecting the CIA from foreign agent penetration. He's well needed today, believe me.
So he has an extensive resume with the Central Intelligence Agency, and he's actually a good agent who has morals and things like that. I think that he does know about the directed energy weapon program. He doesn't speak about it because he has signed a secrecy agreement and he doesn't want any trouble. So he talks about what he can talk about. That's a huge thing, because this is a very moral Christian man who can't come out and talk about everything. Like, he can't talk about the torturing of just regular citizens like us, even though he knows about it. So that's a huge thing to know, that even moral agents are held by these secrecy agreements. Even if they see something that is horrible and killing Americans, their life will be destroyed if they come out and say it. So people ask, he's going to go through a lot more, but people ask, why aren't a lot of people coming out and talking about this? Every agent should come out and talk about it. They sign secrecy agreements, and even more agreements of the people involved at lower levels. They have secrecy agreements where if they do come out, they can be put in jail for talking about treasonous acts by the military-industrial complex. So the CIA and other agencies that are involved in this, basically, it's tyranny. So it's based on fear, kind of like a mobster will go to, a convenience store and say, well, pay up and we'll protect you and stuff like that. That convenience store isn't going to go tell anybody, because then, the mafia will destroy their lives and maybe kill them. So it's kind of like that kind of system is what the military-industrial complex has set up. It's not a system of morals and doing what's right. It's a system of, you toe the line or we'll destroy your life and put you in prison. And there's a lot of whistleblowers who have come out who they've been put in prison for talking about, just waterboarding stuff. I forget the guy's name, but I watched a video on him last night. I may go over a video on him after this, but let's continue, guys.
Now, I'm not going to read his entire resume, but suffice it to say, this man is an authority. He knows of what he speaks. So we're anxiously awaiting this presentation tonight. And our thanks go out to Mr. Brent Bolesky, who I had the opportunity to speak with today. And what a great man, Mr. Brent Bolesky. And of course, the website for Kevin Shipp and the entirety there is realnewswars.info. That's realnewswars.info. Kevin, we're going to give you the floor and not interrupt you whatsoever, and just ask you to give us your presentation of the deep state versus the shadow government, or the shadow government and its subset, the deep state. Tell people the difference and just go through what you went through, because I think it's probably the most powerful, informative, and necessary presentation on the internet right now.
Well, thank you, Doug. And I guess on your end, they're going to advance the slides as I go along?
Yes, sir. Eric is at the ready with the slides. So and I just want to tell people again, if you're just joining us, If you're via Global Star Radio Network, please tune into YouTube after you're done listening on Global Star. If you're driving or whatever, or on BTR, tune into YouTube, and the slide presentation will be there. And by tomorrow, it will be segmented in a standalone presentation.
And so I won't throw in too much stuff because this is really long, and I think I want to go through the whole thing. So it's going to be a mega long video of just basically mirroring this content. But I do want to say, like, for non-target individuals, people who are not directly targeted, this man is not a conspiracy theorist. He's not just grabbing things out of the air or basing this on research. He's basing this because he was in this system. He worked in this system. So these are, like, he's a whistleblower. These things are things that he knew because he worked within the military industrial complex. He worked within the CIA. And he knew these things. So this isn't just some conspiracy theorist who's talking about, oh, the deep state or whatever and basing it off of YouTube videos. I think sometimes people may think that's what I am, but I am doing research, but I'm also basing, I want to bring things to this channel that pertain to us, that connect the dots with directed energy weapon torture, neuro weapon torture, and targeted individuals and organized gang stalking. I do a lot of research because I was never involved in these agencies, but I do have experience in the way that I'm being tortured 24 hours a day with neuro weaponry, V2K, microwave pulsing to the head, to my head and my spine. But this guy, he actually worked there. So he's not just some conspiracy theorist. And I think basically all targeted individuals know about Kevin Shipp. I haven't, seen a lot of what he's done because there's so much information about this out there, that's a very scary to me, that there's so much information about the corruption involved in the military industrial complex, the corruption involved with the CIA, the corruption involved with the intelligence contractors and defense contractors. It's right out there. But you never hear a peep from the mainstream media because they're part of it. And he's going to talk about that. The mainstream media is actually part of the military industrial complex.
By itself. Mr. Kevin Shipp, thank you so much for joining us, and take off when you're ready.
Thank you, Doug. And Eric, as you'll see, each bullet on the slides, you'll have to click on that to advance as I talk to each bullet throughout each of the slides, just so you know as we get going here. As Doug has introduced, and the speech I gave in California, this is, I think, no doubt, probably the most important talk I've ever done. And it's certainly, I think, the most risky for me personally. But we can all see what's going on now in Washington. Many of us have known this for years, that there is an unconstitutional secret government, I call it the shadow government, that functions behind the scenes in Washington. It controls the Congress. I'll get into that in detail. It controls the President of the United States and also the judiciary. This is an unconstitutional government that is essentially running our country and even beyond. So next slide, please, Eric. Now, I always like to begin with reminding everyone that the Constitution is not just a piece of ideology. It's not just a philosophical document. It helps to remember that the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land in the United States. It trumps the entire criminal justice system. So if someone, and that includes a government official, violates the Constitution, they are breaking the law. That is a felony or multiple felonies. So I want people to remember that our Constitution is our supreme law. And if government officials violate that, they need to be held accountable. Next. Now, I make the distinction. You hear a lot of talk about the deep state. I guess now that it's safe. There were some of us talking about the deep state back in 2012 when it wasn't so safe, and it was just us and the crickets. But we felt it was very important that people understand what's going on here. You hear a lot of talk about the deep state. I want to make the distinction. Of course, I come from the belly of the beast.
I want to just stop it for a second there because that's pretty important to me. like he's talking about, like a lot of whistleblowers are talking about the deep state when it was just considered a complete conspiracy in the military industrial complex, and it was just like it wasn't safe to talk about it. They could get into a lot more trouble because the information control, it was actually happening. They were actually successful in controlling information about the deep state and the military industrial complex. And now you see that everybody on YouTube is talking about the deep state. They're talking about the deep state on mainstream media. The president is talking about the deep state. Everybody's talking about the corrupt military industrial complex now. That's very, very hopeful for us target individuals, because right now we're on the precipice. 5 years ago, when I was making YouTube videos about targeted individuals and organized gang stalking, there was 50-50 on my comments. 50% of people were like, go take your meds and everything like that. Now we're seeing on comments, there's no comments like that. There's no comments because everybody who really didn't believe in it has come around, and we're starting to see the mainstream media talk about microwaves because of the Cuban embassy attack and the China consulate attack. So we're moving towards a point where it actually will be trendy to talk about target individuals and organized gang stalking. Because why? Because it's happening. Because it's happening. Because it is the truth. It's the only way it can go. How slow or fast it gets there is really dependent on the actions taken by people who give a shit about it. But we are just negotiating timeline before this is common knowledge and people are just talking about it at their dinner tables. So it's very hopeful when he's saying it used to not be in style to talk about the deep state. Nobody was listening, and now people are putting out videos. People can't get enough of talking about it because this truth is really coming to the top. So let's continue.
From the inside, and I want to make the distinction that there is a difference between the shadow government or the secret government and the deep state. They are intricately connected in a matrix, but they're not one and the same thing. The shadow government is the secret intelligence agencies, specifically the CIA and the NSA, that operate with impunity outside the Constitution. They coerce, intimidate Congress and also the president, and they bind corporations within the deep state with classified contracts, bind them from talking about anything that they see, and essentially take control of their lives professionally and outside. So the shadow government, it manipulates even the deep state. I'm going to get into 2 slides where I kind of break those two down. I just want to stress that they are 2 different entities, the shadow government and the deep state, but they're connected together in a pretty complicated matrix. Next slide. Okay, now it looks like all the information is up there, so that we're not going to have to click through one by one. That's good. You can see this is the shadow government. This is...
Okay, before he goes into it, and he has 2 great slides coming up, this one and another one, I just want to say for other countries, you know, I'm focusing a lot on United States military industrial complex and the you know, the DIA, the CIA, all these agencies that take part in, you know, torture programs and surveillance programs and everything like that. But I do just want to say in other countries, it's probably a setup very, very similar to this. You know, so y'all should look in, people in other countries, you should look into your intelligence agencies, you know, and then also the contractors underneath them that carry out a lot of surveillance, you know, putting up certain satellites, biometrics, and also torture, directed energy weapon torture, and things like that. Also, some of our, like Booz Allen Hamilton and Lockheed Martin, they are international contractors, so they're probably doing a lot of this work for other countries too, because we are #1 in non-lethal weapons technology. So I hate to say it, I mean, we are the evil empire. Alex Jones said it really good, where he's like, it's you know, America really is special in the way that we're the dark empire now, and we're really kind of helping other countries to do evil things. I don't know, Israel's really bad too, but we also have a lot of power to change those things. We like if we start doing things right, or these things are changed, and they will change in other countries. Like if the deep state in our country is stopped and reorganized, then that could hold a lot of sway of how other countries work too. And I know I'm not saying that good. My brain is having a hard time. So let's just continue and let him keep talking. Yeah.
The monster that has been created since 1947, 1948, that has been created, that is the vast system of secrecy that essentially is running our government behind the scenes. These are unelected officials. For example, the CIA was not created with congressional approval. It functions outside the Constitution. We'll talk about that in detail. But let me break down some of the components of the shadow government. Each one of these agencies functions under the cloak, and I want to stress the power of secrecy, just to show you the massive size of this thing. We'll start down at the bottom right with the Director of National Intelligence, who oversees the 17 intelligence agencies. That's 17 intelligence agencies that operate in the secret, the cloak part of our government. Now, they try to tell us that the DNI now controls the CIA instead of the CIA controlling these other 17 agencies. That is not true. The CIA is still in control of these other agencies. You have the Department of Homeland Security and its secret components, the Department of State and its secret components. We saw that when Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was secretly running guns into Libya and Benghazi using Saudi Arabia and Qatar as cutouts. We have the Defense Intelligence Agency, or the DIA. They were intimately involved in the torture program and took it to an extreme.
He's talking about the DIA right now, Defense Intelligence Agency. He's saying they're involved in the torture programs, like to torture suspected terrorists and at Guantanamo Bay and things like that. If you watch Brian Two's video, he talks about the CIA and the DIA. The DIA is very, very integral into our directed energy weapon torture. You know, they hold a very high kind of organizational, strategic spot in kind of how this is going to not how it's going to take place, but certain protocols of torture that we're going through come from the CIA and the DIA. I'm going to stop talking so much because I'm having a hard time, guys. But
we're under investigation. The DIA was trying to get the authority to recruit Americans within the United States. Over to the left there, you have the National Reconnaissance Office. The NRO is the office that puts the satellites, the spy satellites, up into orbit, into the atmosphere. To the left of that, you have...
So National Reconnaissance Office, they're connected to the CIA and the DIA. Under them, they're in charge of actually putting up satellites. So I've heard a lot about, the Air Force having a lot of satellites. Now, what I was thinking is that third-party contractors have clearances to use those Air Force satellites for this torture. Goes from the satellite to the cell tower, then to us, triangulated and hitting us. But I do think that there are organizations like the NRO that actually put up their own satellites for surveillance and for this directed energy weapon torture, not only using Air Force satellites. And I'm not quite sure about that. You know, they could be using it, I don't know. They could be using the NRO satellites just for surveillance, and then using the Air Force satellites for the actual microwave torture. I really think that it's both. I think that they're using the NRO satellites, for this torture, and then they're also using Air Force satellites. But I'm not sure, because these people who are doing treason and doing these things that are very illegal, they still do work by this weird set of rules where they make sure that people have clearances, they make sure that people sign these secret agreements, and that the ones that would do this would have signed secret, secret agreements for working with these agencies. So we're getting a picture, but not sure about the details of exactly. But it's important to know that the National Reconnaissance Office does put up satellites. They work under the CIA and the DIA, or alongside of the DIA, to put up a lot of these surveillance satellites that have magnetrons on them that can relay the signal to magnetrons on cell towers and then to our bodies, our brains, and our nervous systems. A remote platform would, tell the satellite to send the signal or whatever to the cell tower, then to us. let's let him keep going.
We have the National Counterterrorism Center, which is the new center created to combat the amorphous threat of terrorism. They have tremendous components of secrecy there. Up from that, you have the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, or NGA, and it is the NGA that gave us, believe it or not, Google Maps. The NGA was intimately involved with Google in the production of Google Maps, so it's not just Google that can see down and see our cars and our swimming pools. That was created via government intelligence satellites. The FBI, as we all know, since the Patriot Act, has its own secret components. They are engaging in warrantless searches of Americans' homes, up to 4,000. We got the FBI Director, Robert Mueller, to admit after fabricating 3 times. We got him up to 4,000 times. And when he was pressed on it further, he said he couldn't remember the number of times the FBI has entered an American's house without a warrant. Couldn't remember. This is the directive of the FBI. Slide over to the right hand of the slide, and you'll see JSOC just above DNI. The Joint Special Operations Command, that is the President of the United States Secret Army. Most people don't know that exists. It's a secret army that the President can quietly send out into any foreign field to engage in special operations, and that includes the use of lethal force. Up above that, you've got the National Security Agency. We'll talk about that later. And now the NSA is directly connected to Silicon Valley. As we have seen, Google, Yahoo, Facebook, and on it goes. The NSA is using Silicon Valley as its backbone for surveilling U.S. citizens. Let's slide over to the left to the CIA. I have that italicized. I consider the CIA the central node of the shadow government. I'll explain why that is later on in the presentation here. Now, the CIA was created out of the Council of Foreign Relations. Established in 1921, the CFR was behind the creation of the CIA. The CFR was also staffed by major members of the mainstream media. That's what I mean by MSM there. And that includes Philip and Catherine Graham of the Washington Post, who were members of the CFR and were part of Operation Mockingbird, publishing information on behalf of the CIA to change public opinion within the United States. So
that's really important. Like, people, I know people say, why isn't the mainstream media covering a lot of things? And I always say, well, there's national security and Project Mockingbird. There's actually a very organizational connection to the CFR. Many members of the CFR then run these huge mainstream media conglomerates. And so they go with a certain agenda, and they're specifically tied to the deep state. So not only Project Mockingbird, but just an organizational structure where a lot of these people in mainstream media are on board with not telling anything that the CIA does not want them to tell them. Basically knowing that the CIA is like, well, we're not going to talk about torturing citizens because then the public would get infuriated and everything, and this would, the programs would have to stop. And the mainstream media is thinking the same thing because they come from the same place and they work together. They're so tied together. So that can help us to understand why the mainstream media isn't just jumping into this, and they're actually, the New York Times article was propaganda against us, saying that we were, seeing people following us or whatever, and just painting a bad picture about us. Interesting that they're talking about microwaves now. And I'll talk about that on another video. The Susie Dawson stuff kind of explains a lot of that. What she was talking about, at a certain point, the mainstream media has to report even things that they don't want to report, because then they'll lose complete faith. They'll lose faith. The faith of the American people will be completely lost. And then the other lies that they want to keep secret, the American people won't believe anything they say.
This is the shadow government. You can see the size of this massive system of secrecy. I'm going to break this down into detail later on and just show you the shocking power that this system has over our elected government. Next slide. Okay, now here we have, you can see the shadow government feeds down into the deep state in white letters there. And under the deep state, I've got the system behind government. You notice that the S in the system is a dollar sign. The deep state functions with its blood system, and that is...
I just want to stop this to say, things are fucked up. For people who are not directly targeted and experimented on with directed energy weapons, you see the kind of system they're creating, a complex system that keeps getting more and more corrupt, and where people are stifled and they can't say anything about the fucked up things that these agencies are doing because there's so many agencies to keep track of. And the unaccountability has become basically where they work in the shadows. A lot, the CIA and a lot of these defense contractors, intelligence contractors, and DARPA and IARPA, they work in the complete shadows, with only Congress knowing about like what they want Congress to know about. This, I mean, you see all these different agencies that aren't even necessarily defense agencies that are involved in the deep state. Things are very, very fucked up, and this stuff has to come out in the light. He says it later. Let's keep going. I'm sorry I'm stopping it so much, but it's just this is a really, really, really important presentation, so I'm going to go through the whole thing. I think it might just be a long video.
Money, dollars, fortunes are made through the deep state. And we'll start at the left here in the blue letters. You've got the military-industrial complex, which most of us know about. Eisenhower, in his speech, originally called this the military-industrial congressional complex because it was so tied into Congress, it was influencing Congress. I will prove that later on in this slide, that it is a serious problem to our constitutional government. Under the deep state, you've got the huge intelligence contractors that are making billions of dollars off intelligence contracts. Below that, you have defense contractors. I'll talk about some of those. The secret Federal Reserve, which is not a federal agency, that is controlling the deep state. It is issuing money to these defense contractors, not telling any of us which major corporations they are actually giving trillions of dollars to, claiming that their budget has to be secret for quote-unquote national security. And it's gotten to the point whenever we hear the government use the word national security, we need to be concerned.
Yeah.
That's a red flag because that's their definition of national security, not ours, nor the Constitution's. Down at the bottom.
Yeah, and I want to make a point about that. The CIA and these military-industrial contractors, the intelligence contractors and defense contractors, they have clearances, and they're murdering innocent citizens that have done nothing wrong, torturing them, experimenting on them, cooking their bodies with microwaves. Now, they don't want that information to come out, and they tell everybody within this organization of the military-industrial complex, we can't tell anybody about this because it's national security. Now, my national security and the people who are being tortured heavily to death, we have had people die, we've had people commit suicide. That's not our national security, and we're innocent Americans. So what does national security really mean? That's an important point that he brought up there.
You have the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, deeply connected into the world state. Coming out of the Council on Foreign Relations and beyond, the IMF and World Bank is working towards, along with the deep state, a global economic system. Some would call it a global economic government. That is in the works. They're working on that. More on that later. Some people call it the New World Order. Susan Rice and Barack Obama called it the New International World Order. Whatever you want to call it, the deep state is working towards a global economic system. Now you move over to the right there, and you have military-industrial complex lobbyists. These lobbyists are so influential in the deep state. Saudi Arabia, for example, and Israel, they might as well have a seat in Congress with the power and the money that they wield in congressional decisions outside of the elected system. These foreign lobbyists, Saudi Arabia at the top of that, have tremendous influence on our unelected parts of government and tremendous influence over Congress. And you move to the right, and that would include foreign lobbyists, basically, which I just mentioned. You have the central banks up to the upper right center of the slide there. The central banks connected into the IMF and the World Bank. The central banks are connected to what some people call the oligarchy or the financial elites. You control the purse strings. You control the government, as we've heard often before. And then you have Wall Street, which finances the deep state. It finances the defense contractors, the intelligence contractors. I don't know, most people may not know that many of the big Wall Street firms hide their money in offshore accounts so that Americans, Congress, or anyone else really has no idea of the billions or trillions of dollars that these Wall Street banks have.
And Kevin,
Yes,
if I can just jump in real quick,
Yeah, Joe.
How you just talked about the how the funding works. We have been seeing a steady increase in the media losing its ratings, and some people say that if its ratings continue to plummet, they're going to lose advertisers, therefore go out of business. Is the media one of the areas of the deep state that will not run out of money because of who they're funded by?
Well, they're going to have problems with advertisers, but the mainstream media specifically are tied directly into the deep state. They have been since the Council of Foreign Relations, since CIA's program Operation Mockingbird. And by the way, the CIA is still controlling the media. In 1976, the program was changed to being voluntary, and the CIA has all kinds of crafty ways to make things voluntary. So, no, kind of like.
So that's an important point. He's saying in 1976 it was changed to voluntary, the Project Mockingbird, but voluntary. Hey, we're going to give you a choice. It's like a mobster at a convenience store, back when the mob, and they'd say, well, we'll give you protection. You decide. It's voluntary. But if you don't, if you don't play ball, we're going to hurt you. So it's kind of like that. And I don't know if, well, physical violence actually is definite, but it's that kind of voluntary that he's talking about.
Like too big to fail, the banks that the government bailed out. We have got major news outlets that are too big to fail. So the major ones are not going away. And many of them are plugged into the deep state. Some of the members in the correspondence are actually tied into the shadow government. I'm convinced that some of them are even still connected to the CIA. So to answer your question, Joe, the major ones I think will stay around despite how their revenues decline. That answer your question, Joe?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, let's move on. We're talking about the shadow government. This is the secret, massive secret system inside the government. Now, let's look at the number of installations of people. This is inside the United States. Remember that the CIA and the NSA are supposed to have charters that only function with a mission outside of the United States. That is in their regulations and their charters until 9/11 happened. Now, if you look at this slide at the top, there are 10,000 secret organizations that are operating within the United States.
10,000 secret organizations working within the United States. I think I'm going to stop it on each one of those and repeat exactly what it is, because this is crazy. This is crazy right here. The numbers of people working for secret programs and working in conjunction with these agencies is insane. And I think we know the world's insane, so we're all like, well, no surprise, but it's crazy.
10,000, so many that not even Congress knows about them all. To the left there's 1,271 major government agencies involved in secrecy inside the United States.
1,271 major government agencies that are involved in secret. I can't remember what he said. My memory's so bad. But 1,271 like governmental agencies that are involved in secrecy, in the secret goings on of the military-industrial complex.
States. You move over to the right there's 1,931 major private corporations involved in secrecy in the United States.
1,931 private corporations that are involved in secrecy with these agencies in the military-industrial complex. 1,931 private corporations with clearances that only, like only the CIA, well, the CIA shouldn't have any secret clearances. It should be completely reorganized because it's so corrupt. 1,931 private companies.
United States, more on that later. Down at the bottom, 4,800,000 Americans hold government secrecy, hold government clearances and have signed the government secrecy agreement. I'll explain why that's important. Down at the bottom, hundreds of thousands of Americans, from secretaries to people in the mailroom to CEOs, have signed contracts with the CIA, the NSA, and some others, but primarily those two. They've signed contracts, and all of them have been required to sign a CIA secrecy agreement. They are now bound by the CIA. People don't realize this.
Hundreds of thousands, so hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people have signed secrecy agreements with the CIA. If they are in integral positions in private companies or even not, even private companies that aren't directly involved with CIA operations and DIA operations and DoD operations, defense contracts, anything like that. Some maybe just regular companies have signed secrecy agreements and stuff like that to actually work for the CIA. I think
When
that's
the
right.
CIA offers them a contract and they take it, they are now bound, and the CIA now is in control of them. And most of them, they've got dollar signs in their eyes, and they don't think that one through. So over to the left there, you've got 854,000 Americans that have top secret security clearances with the shadow government. But I want to stress that these figures are the only ones that we know. The 4,800,000 Americans with government clearances, the 854,000 with top secret clearances, those are just what we know. And I can guarantee that the shadow government is quite a bit bigger than that. Now, at the bottom of this slide to the left, you'll see the secrecy agreement. The secrecy agreement is a confidentiality agreement originally created by the government to protect legitimate sources and methods. For example, satellite technology, important weapons of warfare, troop movements overseas.
So that has to do with us. So satellites, secret satellites, and secret weapons. So directed energy weapon systems would be one of those, especially the ones hitting innocent citizens. People who know anything about this, who are like in a position working on contracts with this or anything like that, they sign secrecy agreements. They can go to jail for speaking out about this. That's why we have to really applaud and just, I bow to people like Kevin Shipp, to people like Bill Binney, to people like I can't remember the other guy, Kirk Weavy, and there are many others. Edward Snowden. They are heroes. This guy is a hero. Edward Snowden was a hero. Is a hero still. They're trying to tell people about stuff that is so dangerous to them, so dangerous to the American people. So if you hear anybody saying they're traitors and everything like that, then they don't understand how bad this is. These people are heroes. Kevin Shipp is a hero.
It was initially created to protect those things from getting out into the public for obvious reasons. It is now has morphed into a weapon used by the shadow government, a weapon of intimidation to silence anyone who sees any program that they think is illegal or unconstitutional. They will have signed the secrecy agreement, which threatens administrative action, termination, or prison if they talk about any activity connected to the shadow government that they're involved in or have been involved in at some time in the past. So they are now bound to keep their mouths shut, and they can, and in 99% of the cases, they will not say anything about what the shadow government is doing for fear of their financial life, prison, or even worse. Down to the bottom right, I'll talk about this in detail. If an American citizen has the courage to push what they have found out about what the shadow government is doing, to push it all the way to the top, if they survive that long, the government, the CIA and the NSA specifically, have the monarchical power to use what is called the state secrets privilege, and they can shut down any case against them with impunity, no questions asked, without examining any of the evidence, and those cases are sealed forever, so not even Congress or the Senate can see information in that case, including unclassified information. So
he's saying even if somebody does come out and they bring it all the way up through the courts, there's something called state secret privilege that can close those cases and block them off to the public. So I think that has a lot to do with a lot of the cases that have been won by target individuals where they're given gag orders and nobody can get any of that information. The Richard Kane case, a lot of people have gotten that information. James Wahlberg, a lot of people have gotten that information, but it blocks that off. I'm not sure if those cases are exactly what he's talking about, but he's just basically saying if anybody does come out and talk about any of these corrupt things and bring it into court, they can easily cover them up. They have rules, state secrets privileges, where they can just lock off those cases like that. So it's this whole system of, secrecy, and they've got many levers in place. So when non-target individuals who aren't targeted directly think about this stuff, and you're like, that's just too big. people being, tortured and, tortured and experimented on. Not everybody's in on the conspiracy. Not everybody has to be in on the conspiracy. There are many, 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 many levers in place, and layers of levers in place to keep information from coming out. So it's not just like everybody has to be on board and everybody has to be evil. There are many, many different levers in place to keep huge secrets and secret programs from coming out to the public, and that's like with the directed energy weapon program, the torture program, and the life destroying program that target individuals are going through. There's many, many levers in place to keep this information subdued so nobody knows about it. That's changing. That's changing, but I just want y'all to see this huge system in place. And I hate it when people say, "Oh, well, they couldn't carry out something really big without everybody would have to keep that secret," and stuff like that. There are levers in place for making sure that people keep those secrets, and even if they don't keep those secrets, anything that they come out with is suppressed. It's suppressed by these agencies that are doing the horrible, corrupt stuff. Okay.
When you look at this slide, you see at least the tip of the iceberg of the power of the shadow government inside the United States. Next. Now let's look at this. Everybody's heard of the military-industrial congressional complex. And let's look at why Eisenhower called it the congressional complex. This is the matrix of influence that the military-industrial complex has overcome.
I just want to say before I keep stopping it too much. I'm sorry, guys. I really just wanted to go through this, but it'll just be a long video, and y'all can just watch it in different parts. But all of these, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, General Dynamics, Raytheon, Booz Allen Hamilton, are all involved in directed energy weapon research and development and manufacturing. So these big ones, and listen to what he says about Lockheed Martin.
Now remember, the only voice that we the people have in Washington, D.C., in our government is Congress. So obviously Congress is the shadow government and the deep state's primary target of control. You control Congress, you control the American people. More on that later. But through the Defense Authorization Act, which is done in secret, there are 48 senior members, congressmen and senators, who meet and vote on the Defense Authorization Act and how much money is going to be given for military-industrial complex contractors for that kind of work. And if you can see, let me start at the left. Lockheed Martin is essentially a private federal government. Let's say a private shadow government. Lockheed Martin has gotten so massive and so huge, it rivals several U.S. government agencies. Lockheed Martin has a program where they track all of our mail through the Postal Service. They're developing the biometrics being used at the airports. Lockheed Martin, in addition to making bombs, missiles, and nuclear warheads, Lockheed Martin is involved in all kinds of classified information outside of just planes, bombs, and missiles, to the extent that they are so funded by Congress. It's been locked in pretty much that each American household pays Lockheed Martin through their taxes about $260 a year for every household in the United States. Lockheed Martin is behind designing information tracking programs for the CIA, behind information collection with the NSA, and on and on it goes. I want people to remember Lockheed Martin. It is.
So I kind of want to stop it. I guess it's just going to be a really long video because I've got it. So I've heard targeted individuals say, yeah, they're using our taxes for this, and I was always like, no, it's probably the Federal Reserve just creating money to do this, and then lobbyists giving money, to Congress to then give them more funds. This comes from our tax dollars and a bunch of other places, but taxes from American citizens are going to these private contractors to torture and kill, maim, microwave innocent citizens. Tax money is used. So I'm paying taxes that are going into my own murder. That is very, very true. I've come to, like, in the last 2 years, I believe that, but before I was like, no way are our taxes paying for this. this is secret black budget money and they get it through other ways. Our tax dollars are going into murder of innocent citizens and the 24-hour-a-day harassment and torture and murder of innocent U.S. citizens. Incredible. That's a fact.
Essentially a para-government. It is a secret government. It is so massive, it rivals the size of several federal agencies. Now let me move on here, pick it up a little bit. You've got Northrop Grumman. These are the major military and industrial complex firms that are influenced. I picked these because they're the big dogs, the too big to fail companies, private companies, and these are the ones that really are running things in terms of the MIC. You've got Boeing. Now over to the right, you have the infamous Booz Allen Hamilton. That is where Edward Snowden worked. Booz Allen Hamilton is another massive organization that's been working specifically with the CIA and the shadow government going back about 30 years. They even helped the CIA set up the intelligence apparatus for the government of Egypt. That was Booz Allen and Hamilton. Above that, you've got Raytheon, then you've got General Dynamics. Now, what I want to point out here, all this is done through the votes of the Congressional Armed Services Committee, of which our friend John McCain is the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. Each one of the members, these 48 senior members and other congressmen and senators, get similar contributions into their re-election campaigns, which is really important to note, and also into their leadership PACs. Each one of these 48 members receive an average each of about $700,000 per year in contributions from these military industrial contractors. I've got up there the picture of Senator John McCain. In 1 year, John McCain received $694,508 from the military.
So that's how they get Congress to go along with some of these things without even knowing they're going along with them. They just grease their palms, and the congressman or senator, the representative or senator votes the way that Lockheed Martin wants them to vote, or Booz Allen Hamilton enacts legislation that helps what they're doing. Raytheon, huge microwave weapon manufacturer and research and development. They just grease the palms of Congress. They may not tell them everything that they're going to do with it. I don't know. I'm still up in the air about that. I'm still up in the air about the secret, the 48 senior members of the Armed Services Committee knowing that innocent citizens are being tortured and experimented on with microwave weapons. I don't know what they're told, but I think I'm starting to kind of think that these 48 senior members know that innocent citizens are being tortured and murdered and experimented on. These are congressmen, these are senators and representatives. So I don't want to believe it. I effing don't want to believe it, but I'm starting to think, this is the Armed Services Committee, not just all congressmen, not just all representatives and senators, but a secret 48 senior member, Armed Service Committee.
Industrial complex as the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. So I would ask the audience this question: is it in John McCain's financial interest to push for foreign wars or covert operations? I would say yes. As a matter of fact, John McCain has been the poster boy of the MIC. You see him on television programs, just about every television program they can get him on. John McCain is on there pushing for war in Syria, and on it goes. Well, now we see the motivation: $698,000 plus a year into his pocket for pushing essentially war, bombs, and missiles. Down at the bottom, you can see that the budget is $1 trillion of annual spending for defense-related purposes. That is a massive budget. And guess who, guess who is the largest arms dealer in the world? That would be us. United States, under this budget, spends $46 billion a year in foreign arms sales to countries like Saudi Arabia and others. So here you have the military-industrial complex, which functions underneath the deep state. Next. Now, we have something that I uncovered. I call this the secret intelligence industrial complex. Most people don't even know this exists. If you go out there and do some searching, you can find it. It is a massive corporate monopoly that has huge contracts with the CIA, the NSA, the NGA, and the NRO. Now, these the CEOs, both in the military-industrial complex and in the secret intelligence industrial complex, the average salary of the CEOs of these corporations is $2.7 million a year. That's what.
And guys, I just want to, I'm sorry again for butting in. This is a great presentation by Kevin Shipp. This is integrally, this organization that he's showing of all these mechanisms and agencies in the military industrial complex, this is who's carrying out our torture. The research and development, or whatever, the torture and murder of us. These guys. So this is just super, super important. This organizational structure can show us how this is being carried out and who's doing it. I think I would say that this isn't the pinnacle of the pyramid, but it's very, very high up rungs of the pyramid that are carrying this out. So like what I'm saying basically is, I know at the top of the pyramid, they may be saying, well, we need to do population control, we need to do this and that, we need to, transhumanism is important. They may have, agendas that are using these agencies and directed energy weapon torture and stuff to do those. But in these rungs right underneath, it's the lie is different at every level. And this would probably be a rung like right underneath the top of the pyramid, what he's talking about here. I don't know if that made sense. Not making much sense today, but I'll try and make more sense. I did take my kratom before I did this video, and I'm hoping that'll get rid of some of the pain that I'm
They make the CEOs a year. This is big business for these people. You got Leidos Holdings, a massive company. Now, again, these are the two big to fail intelligence industrial contractors. SAIC, which was part of the NSA program that failed, the surveillance program that Bill Binney came out and talked about, and Thomas Drake came out and talked about. They lost $7 billion of taxpayer money because the program didn't work, and hence Bill Binney and others came out about that. Over to the right there, or excuse me, let's go down to the bottom. Once again, we see our old friend Booz Allen Hamilton popping up again. Billions of dollars in contracts from the intelligence, the secret shadow government, from the intelligence agencies. Booz Allen Hamilton makes a lot of money from this system. Over to the right, you have CACI. They were the ones that ran the torture program for the CIA. And up top, you have the last one, CSRA, which is another billion-dollar corporation. These corporations do up to 80% of the work for the shadow government. The secret complex are done by these private corporations. This is, if you look at the bottom, $50 billion annual budget in, of course, our tax revenue, which the majority, if not all of us, have no idea that money is being spent for those things.
No accountability.
There is no vote for what that money is spent on. It is a secret budget. Now, these companies do top secret work, which means everything that they do with this $50 billion budget is top secret. None of it is reported. These are unelected officials that most of us don't know about, which means that they have absolutely no accountability to Congress or the American people. For example, SAIC lost $7 billion through the badly instituted, engineered NSA surveillance program. Essentially, SAIC is still getting government contracts despite losing $7 billion. Next slide, please. Now you can see why I'm taking some risk here with revealing some of these things, but I've pretty much had enough. People need to know about this. They need to know this is going on. We're in a post-constitutional government, but this is still a republic, a democracy, and the people should be in charge, and they have a right to know. Now, I bring this in because it's so important, especially now with the economy. The shadow government and the deep state, this is their budget, which comes out of IRS taxes. And if you can see this, I hope you can read it. The cost of the shadow government and the deep state. The total intelligence agency budget, as I mentioned, is $50 billion. The total defense budget is $598 billion. The cost of overseas military bases, many of which are no longer needed, is $150 billion. The military aid to foreign countries like Pakistan, who really don't like us very much, our aid to foreign countries is $5.9 billion, and congressional lobbyists on behalf of the military-industrial complex and others cost about $4 billion. That is a total that the shadow government and deep state spend of tax dollars of about $803 billion a year in tax revenue, some of which is done in secret. Now look down at the bottom. Here's the cost to Americans' vital security. Social Security has been robbed, stolen. The money through taxes that Americans have put in there has been taken by Congress and spent to the point where it's in the red. And now they're talking about someday it may go away. That is, people have contributed into that their entire working life, and it has been stolen by Congress. Medicare, they're talking about, well, this is an entitlement program and it's too expensive. We're going to have to defund Medicare. Medicaid, well, same thing. We can't keep these entitlement programs on for too long, so we're going to have to defund and maybe eventually eliminate that. Healthcare, took decades to get a healthcare program in. Shame on Congress for that. And now they're talking about, well, it's too expensive. Anybody that has a pre-existing condition, it's too expensive to cover those, so they're going to have a special plan with higher premiums. So mom and dad who are in their 70s or 80s when they need health insurance the most, they all have pre-existing conditions, which means they're going to be put out there paying higher premiums than most other people, premiums that they can't afford if they're on Social Security and other things. Of course, the economy at the bottom, unemployment is probably close to 20%. If you look at the real figures, there's poverty actually in America. Americans are suffering, and there's poverty in the United States. So if we want to solve these problems, I can tell you where we can take the money from, move up to that $803 billion in tax revenue that the shadow government and deep state are spending without our approval on all their programs, so the CEOs can make $27.1 million a year. Most of their program managers can make $120,000, $160,000 a year for many programs that we no longer need. I would say let's hold Congress accountable to take that money that they're spending without our approval on programs that are no longer necessary and go down here and spend it on some of these things that they say have to be defunded because we don't have the money. It's shameful. Next slide, please. All right, the creation of the CIA. I call the CIA the central node of the shadow government. I'll explain why. I put this in my book, this quote. This is a quote from Harry Truman, who approved the CIA, approved it coming into being. After about 3 to 4 years of the CIA's functioning, Truman made this quote in the Washington Post in an op-ed. There is something about the way the CIA has been functioning that is casting a shadow, interesting word, on our historic position of freedom, and I feel that we need to correct it. That was published in an op-ed in the Washington Post, December 22nd, 1963. 3 days later, the Post mysteriously pulled that from the paper, and it wasn't seen again. Now, remember, Washington Post was connected to CIA's Operation Mockingbird back then, and apparently somebody got to them. I think apparently nothing. Someone got to them. Truman was later to call the CIA a sinister and mysterious agency, which we're going to see more of. Next slide. All right, shadow government, the CIA, the central node. This is what the CIA has been involved in. They still control, despite what they say, all of the other 17 intelligence branches. They have tremendous power. We've seen them. The power. Let's go back. We just jumped ahead one. There we go. Thank you. They've instituted the torture program. None of us had any say on that. And by the way, it wasn't just waterboarding. It was worse than that. People died. We've got the drone program. I think they've droned to date about 8 wedding parties, going after one target. Now they can just target based on behavior, not specific information. They've droned 8 wedding parties. They've engaged in 80 coups overseas, the overturning of democratically elected government.
And he doesn't mention drones are used in microwaving targeted individuals. So the more of those drones, some of the drones have capabilities to they've actually taken out he's talking about whole weddings. They've taken out whole weddings just to get at like 1 or 2 terrorists. But also drones are used as stopgap for us. So right now I'm getting hit, and I think I've said this a million times, but I'm getting hit by cell towers around me. I think that's the majority of it, 24 hours a day. But say I drove to Florida to see my parents, and there weren't any cell towers around. I think there are cell towers around that they can that they can, shoot the microwaves through. But if I was in a place where there weren't enough cell towers around stopgap, they would use drones to act with magnetrons in them to carry the microwaves through. So the drone programs he's talking about also include the drones, and they may serve multiple activities, but one of them is to actually do stopgap and to hit target individuals with microwaves to continue the torture 24 hours a day, no matter where we go in the world. Drones are involved in that.
They've engaged in multiple false flags, false operations. If you go back to Operation Gladio, where they were planning false terrorist cells in Italy and staging terrorist attacks, which killed about 491 people. They've been engaged in things like that. Now, this is what I want to stress. The CIA was created with no congressional approval. That is required by the Constitution. These are unelected officials that are engaging in these things. They manipulate Congress routinely with secrecy. I'll show you that a little bit later. The power that the CIA wields with secrecy, way beyond the Constitution. They have manipulated the judiciary system. I'll talk more about that. They control, through the secrecy agreements and the secret apparatus, the defense and intelligence corporations and their employees, which is a massive number of Americans who are financially dependent on the CIA. They have manipulated the president in political decisions. Remember Iraq, the false intelligence that led us into Iraq, which resulted in the death of 5,000 American troops and about 500,000 Iraqi civilians. And I think when someone asked Donald Rumsfeld, don't you feel bad that 500,000 Iraqis have died? And his response is something to the effect, there was something to the effect of, well, it is what it is. Unbelievable. And of course, the CIA's budget, the central node, engaging in all of these things that most Americans, if not all, would disapprove of. That budget is secret. It is now the biggest budget in the intelligence system, even over and above NSA. That budget is secret with our tax dollars. Most of the congressmen and senators do not know where that budget goes. This comes from tax revenue from the American people. Next slide, please. Now, the creation of the CIA, and I appreciate you rearranging these slides so we don't have the overlap because we're not clicking here. The creation of the shadow government. This is very, very important. The central node. The CIA was created through the National Security Act of 1947. This made the CIA accountable only to the president, Harry Truman, at the time, through the NSC, or National Security Council. And of course, Truman later regretted that. Now, this is what's important. This is the authority that was given to the CIA. This is it right here, all of it. This is what it says. The National Security Act of 1947 allows the CIA to, quote, perform such other functions and duties as the National Security Council may from time to time direct. There is no mention in there for authorization, legal authorization for covert operations. None. It's not.
And this is also important to note, and I'll just note it very quickly. The National Security Council is a globalist. It has a globalist function. It's not, it's not nationalistic in its scope. It's globalistic, global in its scope. So when we talk about globalists and New World Order, the CFR have agendas that are based on creating a New World Order. People from the CFR are going over to the CIA. The CIA is so closely interconnected with the CFR. The CIA has a global scope and is interested in creating a New World Order, which, when you think about creation of a New World Order, America's destruction goes along with creating a New World Order. So I just wanted to add that in.
There's no definition in there for what the CIA's role actually is, and there are no restrictions placed on the CIA either, and we can see where that one went. So there is no democratic or congressional oversight over the CIA's creation, nor over its current operations today. This is a serious constitutional loophole of unchecked secrecy and unchecked covert operations, and people need to understand that this is a serious violation of the Constitution, and we can see where it's left us today, and we can
see where it's left us today, and it's led to things like innocent citizens being experimented on in MKUltra, And now with this targeted individual program or directed energy weapon systems research and development, they are so secret and unaccountable that it's led to things like torturing and murdering citizens, and also um, discrediting them. Is that the right word? Discrediting, yeah, discrediting what they say, because they have so much power and they think they can do whatever they want. It's led to the murder of citizens 24 hours a day, torture of citizens. This is really serious. When people, and Kevin Shipp says this, he might say it on this video, but he says when people work in the shadows, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to start doing really bad stuff. You know, they're going to start doing really bad stuff. When an agency is not held accountable, they're obviously going to get more and more corrupt and push that line. And that's an awful, awful reality, but it's also, you know, very, very true.
See the number of things, including pretty serious human rights violations that have occurred through these so-called covert operations.
Yes.
Next slide, please. Now, we talk about the Cold War, and will the Cold War come back again? Is the Cold War coming back with Russia? It's important to note that there is an internal Cold War within our government between the elected government and the shadow government. People need to understand. You can see that right now with Donald Trump in Washington. More on that later. Regardless of what you see about what you think about Donald Trump, Donald Trump has got the shadow government terrified because he has claimed he's going to investigate and maybe revamp it, and they know that his personality is just enough that he would probably carry through on that. But let's look at this. The shadow government against the elected government. It is a huge complex of secrecy, surveillance, and covert programs. It is the size of 23 U.S. Capitol buildings. It's the size of 3 Pentagons. And we can see something that it engaged in which is shocking. If you and your audience remember, John Brennan and the CIA broke into the Senate computers on Capitol Hill and spied on what Dianne Feinstein and the committee was doing, spied on them to see what they were investigating and writing up for the CIA torture report. Literally broke into Senate computers on Capitol Hill and surveilled what they were writing in the torture report. That is a felony. It is breaking the law. John Brennan was behind that. He was responsible for that. I always ask the question, was Mr. Brennan indicted for that? Was anybody held accountable for that? No, he issued an apology, quote unquote, just an apology. But this is the chilling part. They came out and they asked Barack Obama, what do you think about John Brennan and the CIA hacking into the Senate? And Barack Obama's response to that was pretty telling. Well, I have full confidence in Director Brennan's abilities. The reason that President Obama said that, and this is the chilling part, it's because President Obama could do nothing about what the CIA was doing. He couldn't stop it. Brennan and the CIA did this unilaterally, and not even the President of the United States could do anything about it. And that's something that we need to remember because that's extremely important. Okay, next slide, please. Now, along comes Donald Trump, who challenges the shadow government all the way back to JFK, demanding that the assassination of JFK be looked into. And I understand that the classified files on the JFK assassination are due to be released upon presidential approval. I think it's this October. So a lot of these folks are terrified that Donald Trump is going to approve the JFK assassination classified reports, approve them being opened up to the public, which they should have been in the beginning, but being opened up this October. But whatever you think of Donald Trump, whether you think he's a great patriot, whether you think he's a fascist, which I think is farthest from the truth, on and on and on, there's no doubt about the fact that Donald Trump will no doubt examine some of these agencies and what they've done. That's why they are essentially engaging in a de facto, right now it's a character assassination, an information assassination, and let's just hope and pray to God it doesn't go further than that. This is what Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said about this on the Rachel Maddow show in public. If you cross the intelligence community, the CIA, NSA, have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you.
Illegally.
Now just think about that for a moment. If you cross the shadow government, the shadow government has 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you, and he's talking about the President of the United States. I think we have a constitutional crisis here. Next slide, please. So, shadow government system of secrecy. Let's go into and we moved the logo over a little bit, but that's fine. The National Security Agency is the eyes and ears of the shadow government, as we all painfully know. Up there in the right-hand corner is a picture of the original NSA. It was called the Black Chamber. That's basically the size when it just started out during the war. As we also know, the National Security Agency is a massive system of global surveillance, domestic surveillance on we as U.S. citizens. Now, under the Freedom Act, we are told that the NSA domestic surveillance program has been reformed. And I like what Ron Paul said about this. Whenever the government says it's reforming something, we need to be, that's a heads up. We need to be alarmed. They usually reform it in the wrong direction. The surveillance continues. And if you remember the 1.5 billion bits of information that the NSA had scooped up on all of us as Americans, our emails, our texting, our cell phone conversations, electronic pocket litter, on and on and on. With this reform, that information didn't go away. They didn't go in and erase all that information from the Utah data center. That information on all of us still resides on those computers. It's still there. It wasn't removed. And also, the NSA can still go in and surveil American citizens by simply asking for approval from Verizon, for example. The big change was Verizon now has to give the NSA approval to come in and do that instead of the NSA just breaking into their computers without them knowing about it.
I would bet, and this is conjecture, but we know that there are, quantum computers with a whole lot of data, and quantum computers that are kind of propelling this targeting on us, because we got a bidirectional stream of energy going to our head, and it's basically a data stream. It's they have software and everything. I would bet the biggest quantum computer, supercomputer that has to do with this is in Utah. That's conjecture. I know that there are probably other massive supercomputers involved in this and collecting the data that they're getting when they're remote neural manipulating, remote neural monitoring us. But I would probably bet a lot of money that the most extensive one is in Utah. So I just wanted to add that in because we do know that supercomputers are kind of run like the software that our attackers are using, the automated software and some of the AI and stuff like that is being run off supercomputers that our attackers are connected into with their remote platforms when they're hitting us. So I would guarantee one of the biggest ones is in Utah. In Utah, maybe the biggest one.
So now the NSA has to ask approval to do this same surveillance. And the question is, what Silicon Valley company is going to turn them down? There is so much information on us, the American people, that's stored up until this reform that they have to classify it in a new term that's called yottabytes. That is what is stored on the Utah data center on the NSA storage system on what they've collected on American citizens. Yottabytes, the amount of information there would equal filling the states of Delaware and Rhode Island with bits and bytes. That's how much information is on those things. It takes cooling systems the size of a warehouse just to cool off these computers. So we know that NSA has been given exclusive authority to collect and unmask Americans, as we saw with what was going on with the Trump campaign pre and post-election. The NSA and the U.S. government has created the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the FISA Court, which is a new secret Supreme Court that will decide and decides what Americans are going to be surveilled on, whose names are going to be unmasked and revealed. This is a secret court that the Congress and the Senate don't have access to. They don't see. They have nothing to do with these decisions. And of course, we, the American people, are just stuck out of that picture. I want to state here again at the bottom that the CIA and the NSA are shielded by the state secrets privilege. There have been lawsuits regarding the NSA's collecting data on American citizens. Those lawsuits have been shut down with impunity by, guess what? The state secrets privilege, sealed, and not even Congress or Senate will ever see that information. It'll never see the light of day. Next slide, please. Excuse me for a sec. Okay, now, I want to stress this. The shadow government, the secret government, and Congress. Remember, I stressed that Congress is the people's only voice. The only voice that the American people have in our elected government system, designed intentionally by the founding fathers, should be the primary voice, and that is Congress, the United States Congress. Now, Congress has the legal authority to control the CIA through its budget. One problem. The CIA, which is its MO, the CIA classifies and withholds the documents necessary for Congress to do that. It paralyzes Congress through classifying and blacking out the documents, so Congress doesn't even know what it has oversight over and doesn't even know what needs to be cut back. That's how they do it. That's their modus operandi. I'll talk more about that later. Excuse me. And they say we have congressional oversight. There's the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, HPSI and SSCI. Well, we've got oversight bodies over the CIA and the NSA. No, forgive me, but that is a sham. Most of the HPSI and the SSCI are staffed by just a handful of staffers. They're inexperienced in intelligence operations. There's a high turnover, and I've heard of cases when I was on the inside of big folders of information that were supposed to be reviewed by the oversight committees that were just thrown in the closet, and the closet was locked and no investigation was done whatsoever. And remember, for any congressman or senator to really dig deep into the CIA could mean complete professional and career destruction, and probably would. So they're not going to go there. Next one down in the blue, military and industrial complex. The intelligence lobbyists, as I showed you in the previous.
And I just want to say, like, Marco Rubio for the for the Cuban embassy attacks, he contacted John Hall, found out that innocent citizens were being targeted with directed energy weapon systems, were being experimented on, and he has never said anything about that. And I think that has to do with fear. It has to do with they would come after him legally, financially, and in other illegal ways, such as targeting. If he did come out with some of the information that he found. So I think that keeps Congress at bay, even if they do find out about some of the more detailed torture and death to innocent citizens that we're experiencing, which is scary because I still like Marco Rubio, but it's like all these senators and representatives are so controlled in what they say and they talk about, and they have to be very, very brave to come out and fight this kind of corruption because there's a lot of blowback from doing it.
This slide, control congressmen and senators. They are controlling the only body that represents the American people. And many of us know there's a revolving door from Congress to the military-industrial complex. A congressman, after a certain period of time, a year or so, can go out into the military-industrial complex and make millions of dollars as a consultant. We know that James Comey, when he did his stint with Lockheed Martin, as it was a contributor to the Clinton Foundation, James Comey made $6 million in 1 year for sitting on their board. So these congressmen and senators know not to mess with these companies. Many of them know they're going to get big paychecks when they leave. That also applies to congressional staffers. Congress is now sadly composed of statesmen. What I mean by that is they have no intention of changing how the state, the federal government is operating. They have no intention, with a couple of exceptions. I happen to be a somewhat of a fan of Rand Paul, but with a couple of exceptions, most congressmen and senators have no intention of changing the way things are in the federal government. They're statesmen. They make a lot of money through their jobs. They don't want to change anything. They have no intention of correcting some of these constitutional violations. They're not constitutionalists. They're now statesmen. Next slide, please. Now, okay, well, and this, I want to address this too, the deep state, as everyone is calling it now. The deep state is basically just holdovers from the Obama administration. There are plants in there that are trying to destroy Donald Trump. And these are all people have placed there by Obama to get Donald Trump later on. Well, certainly there are holdovers from the Obama administration in there, but I want to stress the shadow government is not a bunch of holdovers from the previous Obama administration. We have to understand the shadow government has been there, it's been operating, it's been controlling Congress, the presidency, and the judiciary. It has been controlling that since about 1948. We lost our Constitution in 1948. For example, the Clinton administration and the Bush Sr., both when Clinton was governor, Bush was president, engaged in the Iran-Contra scandal, broke the law behind Congress, broke U.S. law, broke international law, and engaged in drug running. Then you had George W. Bush, Iraq, NSA surveillance, CIA torture, secret prisons, the FBI warrantless searches. Then you had Barack Obama, prosecuted more leakers than any president in history, expanded the NSA surveillance program, expanded the drone program, and had us going into Syria, supporting the so-called moderate Free Syrian Army, many of which have morphed into ISIS. And you had Hillary Clinton, connected directly to Saudi Arabia with the Clinton Foundation, huge contributions from Wall Street for her speeches and the military-industrial complex, involved in the toppling of the Libya government and the essential de facto assassination of Muammar Gaddafi, who had pleaded with the U.S. To be sent to asylum if the U.S. wanted him gone. They chose instead just to set it up for him to be killed. Secretary of State Clinton was secretly running guns to the Syrian rebels using Saudi Arabia and Qatar, which I mentioned before. Those weapons wound up in the hands of Al-Qaeda and ultimately in the hands of ISIS. Then you have Congress, and this is sad. Congress will promise their voters, their constituents back in their states, that they're going to go to Washington and they're going to make a change. They're going to help them get out of their serious economic crisis. They're going to help restore all these problems with the Constitution. But when they get there, look at their voting records. They support shadow government deep state wars. Some of these secret operations where tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people are killed, citizens. And it was Congress that approved the government surveillance program. That's what I mean by statesmen. They promise their constituents one thing, then they vote for the shadow government behind the scenes.
So what he's saying as a statesman is somebody who doesn't care about the people, what the people want or the people need. They're going to go along with the state, what the state decides, even if it's treasonous, even if it's corrupt. So they'll give us a bunch of promises and stuff like that. They'll say they're going to change things, and then they'll get into office and they will just go along with the corrupt system the way it is. That's why the mainstream media and the military-industrial complex are so scared of Trump, because he's keeping promises that he made. He's not reneging on those. He is keeping those promises and doing what he said that he would do. And he does some things that I don't agree with. I don't agree with Donald Trump on everything, but he's not the run-of-the-mill politician here. And I think that's cool, and I think it is an actual hope for us. It's not a false hope. He can change certain things. Now, he can maybe not make everything completely better, but he can bring a lot of these corrupt practices into the light. He's got a big enough ego for it, and we're gonna see. But return to this. I know it's getting long-winded, guys.
Let's look at some of the shadow government's constitutional violations. Remember, I mentioned at the very beginning of this talk that if any government official violates the Constitution, that is a felony. They are breaking the law. So I want you to remember that as we go through these constitutional violations that the shadow government, that the government and the deep state have done. They have control over congressional hearings, withholding information, documents, and testimony by blacking it out. Under the MKULTRA program, where the CIA was engaging in drug testing on unwitting people, the CIA destroyed most of those documents, so Congress couldn't even see what was being done. The same thing happened with Operation Mockingbird, documents destroyed. And we saw with the torture program, the videotapes of tortures were also destroyed, and they got away with all of it. Blocking Congress from covert programs, engaging in covert programs that Congress doesn't even know about. That's a violation of the Constitution. Classifying and concealing illegal operations, like the Iran-Contra affair, for example, a felony. Establishing covert funding from illegal activity. Going back to Operation Gladio, I'd recommend a book called The Unholy Alliance by Paul Williams, where he documents with 2,000 footnotes that the CIA was essentially running drugs to obtain money for its covert funding and running that money, laundering it through the secret Vatican bank, which keeps no records. We know that
So under this classifying and concealing illegal operations, some private corporations, they're supposed to be private corporations, but they have military clearances, like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Booz Allen Hamilton. They know more than our representatives and senators do about what's going on, about operations of agencies in the military industrial complex. Illegal operations, if they're classified, Congress can't know anything about them. They keep that information from Congress in a lot of ways, in a lot of different ways. That is scary, because what he says, and the main point that he says, is that the Congress speaks for the people. And when the Congress doesn't know anything, how can it speak for the people? And there's so many levers of corruption and keeping them from speaking and keeping them in money so that they vote the way that the military industrial complex wants them to vote. And then they don't even know the really bad stuff that would maybe make them speak out, even if their families were destroyed and their finances were destroyed and they were fired or maybe put into prison. There are some very moral men who are senators and representatives, I believe. But there's so many levers to keep them from talking, to keep them cooperating and towing the line. And concealing illegal operations is one of them. If they're classified, you have to have a certain clearance, and a lot of people that are representatives and senators do not have that clearance to know. But they can tell them, hey, like, I'll give you an example. There was a report on directed energy weapons in 2018 to Congress, to all of Congress, and it said, hey, we're doing some research and development on different directed energy weapons, and it's a great new technology and everything. But obviously a classified part of that, so they told them everything that was unclassified. Booz Allen talks a lot about directed energy weapon research. But the classified part is that they're experimenting and torturing innocent citizens who have never committed a crime, microwaving our brains and everything. That's classified. So only certain people in the private corporations have clearance. People in the CIA have clearance. People in the military industrial complex have clearance to know that. Congress does not have clearance to know that, so cannot make good decisions, cannot stop. They're only told the good things that they want them to know that are unclassified, and then they give them a bunch of money to fund projects, and a congressman could be like, well, yeah, hey, directed energy weapons, it'll protect us and everything like that, without even knowing the classified research on innocent citizens. Taking power away from the people, taking power away from the people. So
state, especially the shadow government, has surveilled Congress. The NSA surveilled Congress's discussions with Israel about the Iran nuclear program. I've just demonstrated that John Brennan and the CIA broke into Senate computers. These are felonies. Was anyone prosecuted? Was anyone indicted? No, no one. Control of the judiciary with the secret FISA court and the unbelievable, abominable use of the state secrets privilege, which is the same power as a king. I thought we were supposed to get away from the rulership of a king. Secret use of the Americans' tax dollars for secret budgets, for all of this stuff. Secret budgets with absolutely no approval by the taxpayer or the voter, which I've talked about. Domestic massive surveillance of U.S. citizens, 1.5 billion bits of information a day, and one after another. Government officials lying under oath. The DNI lied under oath about the NSA program. The CIA has done it multiple times with impunity. The NSA has lied under oath, and the FBI lied under oath. Director Mueller lied under oath about the number of times that the FBI had broken into Americans' homes without a warrant. Sadly, it continues. Next slide. More constitutional violations, felonies, secret operations involving human rights violations. In Chile, the Augusto Pinochet regime, the CIA paid and supported Pinochet's forces, which killed, they killed 40,000, executed 40,000 civilians, and 200,000 other civilians disappeared. That was supported by the CIA. Silencing whistleblowers, which we've seen, elimination of the right to trial. Most people, intelligence officers, don't realize they have no right to trial when they sign up with the shadow government. Secret prisons, rendition, and torture. If you go all the way back to the original creation of the CIA with Allen Dulles, guess what Allen Dulles was involved in? Secret prisons, rendition, and torture. The organization hasn't changed a bit. The National Defense Authorization Act, which includes, as most of us know, the indefinite detention of American citizens without habeas corpus. Boom, just lock them up with no constitutional rights whatsoever. FBI national security letters, we know about that, where the FBI can go into someone's employer, demand all their information, and then advise that supervisor if they tell the employee they're going to prison for doing so. Warrantless searches that the FBI has engaged in. The drone assassination program, we know now that the president has a presidential kill list where he decides who's going to get droned out. And as I mentioned, they've hit several, they call it collateral damage, a shameful term, but we've seen that they've hit, in counting, eight wedding parties, bombed entire cafes going after one person, killing, I think in that case, 34 innocent people. And then we have 9/11. That's a whole nother lecture, but 9/11 has us in a continual state of emergency. Remember the war on terror? War will place the United States in a state of emergency, overriding the U.S. Constitution, meaning the government can supersede the Constitution at any time. We are still in that continual state of emergency, and Barack Obama reinstituted and extended that state of emergency. We'll see what Donald Trump will do. Ladies and gentlemen, these are felonies. These are violations of the U.S. Constitution by government officials and government agencies, and I just want to drive that point home. Next slide, please. Now, the shadow government, they'll reward the faithful. If you just keep your mouth shut and you engage in these unconstitutional things, as we have seen, you won't be indicted, you won't be prosecuted. In many cases, you'll be rewarded. Here we have George W. Bush, President George W. Bush, awarding the Presidential Medal of Freedom to CIA Director George Tenet. George Tenet, who provided falsified intelligence leading to the Iraq War, the death of 500,000 Iraqi civilians, 5,000 U.S. troops, somewhere between 10 and 20,000 U.S. troops injured or suffering from PTSD, with a suicide rate, I think, of 6 per day or something like that. So he provided falsified intelligence leading to the Iraq War. He withheld critical information prior to the 9/11 attack, and the CIA was the only federal agency that refused to provide any information to the 9/11 Commission. They wouldn't give them a thing. They wouldn't let them see a thing. And of course, George Tenet presided over and supervised, managed the torture program, renditions, and secret prisons. And what does he get? He gets a medal for doing it. George Tenet also invoked the state's secrets privilege, the power of a monarchy, to seal cases against him in cases like this, more than any other CIA director in history. Now, during the whole time that Director Tenet was involved in these things, guess who was his chief of staff? Chief of staff was none other than John Brennan. John Brennan was later rewarded and appointed as director of, guess what? The CIA. And John Brennan, being rewarded, continued the torture program, the drone program, expanded the drone program, spied on the Senate, and John Brennan continued to invoke the state's secrets privilege to seal cases against the CIA. So the shadow government rewards itself. Next slide, please. Excuse me. I call this, humbly, in my book, The Tyranny of Secrecy. Secrecy is now used to subvert the U.S. Constitution. It is an incredible power that the shadow government has to completely circumvent Congress, circumvent the Constitution, manipulate the President of the United States, and manipulate the judiciary. This is tyranny. Next slide, please. We all remember this, John F. Kennedy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. And later on, he said, I will splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. John F. Kennedy's major enemy was then CIA Director John Dulles. John Dulles was engaged in multiple human rights violations, torture, rendition, experiments on human beings, and on and on and on it went. That's another lecture. He was the arch enemy of John F. Kennedy. After John F. Kennedy fired Alan Dulles, which was the only biggest black mark on Dulles' entire career, which he resented the rest of his life. And after Dulles was fired, he got together and organized a group of former senior CIA officers, managers, to work against Kennedy's policies and try to subvert his policies. As we know, John F. Kennedy was eventually assassinated, and guess who they put in charge of the Warren Commission investigating the assassination. Alan Dulles. They put Alan Dulles in charge of the Warren Commission investigating the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The Fox investigating the hen house. We'll just leave that one right there. Let's move on. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, I'll have to, the slide's being rearranged a little bit, but good. These slides had transitions where the words moved around and things, and we just couldn't do that here, so I apologize to the audience.
So I'll go through a couple more minutes of this. I know it was really long. I think we got through all the information that really pertains to us. I mean, you know, target individuals and organized gang stalking. We're part of a larger picture of corruption and these agencies in the military industrial complex just doing whatever they want to do, an evolution of evil, and since they're doing things in the shadow, doing even worse and worse and worse stuff to maintain control and to maintain power, and also just to make a ton of money, you know, on consumer products and things like that off the experimentation, you know, the murder of innocent civilians. So I think we got through all that really, really important stuff that I just wanted to show y'all how it's kind of how the web is organized. And his first two slides really show that, how this web is organized and all the ties that they have to the mainstream media and everything like that. I'm going to go ahead and play it a couple more minutes. I'm just, my back really hurts, guys, and I'm getting pulse like right in the front of my head. So I feel like I'm about to pass out. But I'm going to go through a couple more minutes. Have a lot of other information about Directed Energy Professional Society, and then the Moscow microwaves that started in 1953, and I want to make some connections on that. But I'm going to wait till another video. I might make it just tomorrow or maybe in a couple of hours or something like that. Take a break and try and get myself together, and just keep on connecting more and more dots, putting information out there. Because the deal is, and I know this is not just, it's not justice, but and people should just know that we are being murdered, and the murder should be stopped in any kind of rational, logical society that really does care about human rights. But we are in a, you know, as we can see, it's organized evil and organized unaccountability. So what we have to do, and which is not just, we shouldn't have to do this. There should be investigations of this going on all over Senate investigative committees. There are a bunch of court cases right now. We're getting places, but we have to act as lawyers, and we have to just line up the dots for people, create a foundation, layer after layer after layer after layer of evidence and whistleblowers speaking out about this stuff, so people can say, okay, yeah, because this stuff, it's mind-blowing that agencies in the military industrial complex could be doing such evil things to their own citizens. I think everybody knows they do incredibly evil things overseas, and we don't really do anything about that. But we really have to play lawyer here. And we you know, I think that our stories and what we're going through, you know, I did a lot at first, more in the years before now. We need to do a little bit more than that. And it's not justice. We should just be able to tell people what we're going through. We kind of need to play lawyer, and we need to build up the evidence and show the evidence and connect the dots so people can go, okay, wow, it really is that serious. So I don't know where I was going with that, but that's kind of what I've been trying to do lately, is just stack up the evidence, help us as directly targeted individuals. I think everybody in the world is targeted in some way, but people that I'm talking about, like me, who are targeted by directed energy weapon systems and neuro weapons and things like that, to build us up a foundation where we all kind of get on the same page. And we know how this is going on. We know kind of who's doing it. And so I don't want to hear, I know that this will still happen, but I hate it when I hear a target individual on a conference call and they're like, who's doing this? Who's gang stalking? And, you know, who would be hitting us with weapons? Is it like the mafia or something like that? And they really don't know how it's going on. We really need to establish a bottom line where we can all work from, and then build layer on layer on layer on layer of evidence and facts, so that we can be on the same page, and then we can get other people who are not directly targeted like us on the same page. I think it's very important. I think it's happening. It's happening as we speak. But all we can do is just add to that foundation, as we go for bigger and bigger things, class action suits, the mainstream media, being forced to report this, big things, lots of, the billboards coming out, more and more people who didn't know they were target individuals, finally realizing and then joining the fight. And especially, especially what I really want is for non-directly targeted people who are in alternative news and know about the corruption in the world to know about this, and please help us. Please add to our voice. Anonymous, just regular social media out there. We Are Change, Alex Jones. These social media outlets. All right, my brain's very foggy, so I hope I made my points there. But I'm gonna play this for a couple more minutes. I'm not doing good, so I'm gonna try and wake up for a couple of hours and get to feeling better, and then go over that other information, specifically on direct. I have so much information on it. There's so much information right in our faces, guys, and we just need to. More target individuals just need to be doing this. And Dr. Horton, Ella, Ramola, Dr. Carlstrom, Kevin Shipp, like people like this, they're getting the information out there. We need more people doing it, guys. We need more people. If you see a video that you like, if you can get a YouTube video or put it up on Twitter, getting that information out there. Keep getting that in, because there's so much of it. So we all need to be pushing that information into social media and create. And this is what I've said a lot from 5 years ago or 6 years ago when I started making videos. I said we gotta deluge social media. Kevin Shipp says the same thing. I don't know if we're going to get to the point where he says that, but he says we really need to about the military industrial complex and the government being so corrupt and having this web of deceit and stealing money from the public to do horrible things. We need to make a social media storm. The more social media storm that we make, the more that the media has to report it. So that's where I think that I fit in a small way. I'm not huge or anything like that, but in a small way, maybe a couple of people from other social media sites who are getting millions of views, they see my videos and they say, this is important. I gotta edit a video about this. And I'm also gonna be trying to edit some better stuff. Right now, I'm just working with the energy level that I have, my brain being so microwaved. I'm just doing my best, guys. But there are a lot of people who are maybe not directly targeted, or maybe some targeted individuals that have a little bit more energy than me. Y'all get out there. Y'all put this information out. This is our lives at stake. The lives of children who are being experimented on and tortured. The lives of men and women who had good lives and put in money to the system and did their best for their families, and at the end of their lives they're being tortured and experimented on, their lives destroyed at the end of their lives. So every age range. So this is super important. We've all just got to do the best that we can with what we have left. All right, so let's keep going with this for a little.
But here's where it all started. The government legalized lying to the American people, called the state's secrets privilege. I want everybody to remember that. There was an Air Force B-29 bomber, 1948, crashed in Waycross, Georgia. I've been to the site. I've got photographs of the site in my book. 3 RCA civilian engineers were killed in that crash. Their widows asked the Air Force in this classified program connected to the shadow government what caused the crash, what caused their husbands to die. The Air Force came back and said, well, we can't tell you what caused the crash because it's classified. Same old, same old. We're seeing that today. The widows took the Air Force to court, demanded to know what caused the crash of this bomber, and that is when the shadow government, the Air Force, the CIA, created the state's secrets privilege, derived it directly from the monarchy, the King of England, put it into place, and invoked the state's secrets privilege to shut down the widow's case and seal it forever. Incredibly, that crash report of that Air Force B-29 bomber was found, guess where? On the internet, completely unclassified, and it showed gross negligence on the part of the pilots that drove that B-29 right into the ground in that farm. So the whole thing was a lie. It wasn't classified. The crash report was unclassified, but it did show severe negligence on part of the U.S. Air Force. That was used to create the state secrets privilege. As I mentioned, the state secrets privilege is now used by the CIA and the NSA to seal any cases against them forever, so not even Congress or Senate has access to the information. So the point is, the state secrets privilege, the most tyrannical power in the U.S. government, was based on a lie by the government, and it's now treated as tyrannical law. Next slide, please. Shadow government, tyranny of secrecy. The shadow government, specifically the CIA, has control over Congress. I want you all to see this because this is the shadow government manipulating and controlling our elected government. Control over the Congress, manipulating congressional hearings, withholding clearances from congressmen and senators. If they don't want a congressman or senator to know what they're doing, they just withhold the clearance. You can't see any of the information if you have the clearance that only the CIA can give you. They classify documents to conceal their illegal activity, so Congress can't even see what's in the documents. I'll show you.
So that's, I believe that for a while, that a lot of senators and representatives do not know that innocent citizens are being experimented on unless they find it out through our material. Like the people who are being attacked put it out. John Hall's talking about it. Robert Duncan, Marco Rubio contacted John Hall and did find out about it, but they don't find out about it. Maybe that the 48 members of the I can't remember the name of it. Maybe they might know about some of it, but the rest of Congress doesn't have the clearances to know about classified information. Us being tortured and being hit with neuro weapons and directed energy weapon systems 24 hours a day, that's classified information, and people have to have certain clearances to know about that. So that's one of the reasons why I don't believe the majority of senators and the majority of representatives do not know. They may know about directed energy weapon systems. They may think that it's something that we're just going to use against enemies overseas, and they might just think that it's being experimented on, animals and stuff like that, because that would probably be unclassified. Unclassified, the directed energy weapon systems are being experimented on, like rats and monkeys and stuff like that. The classified information that they'd have to have clearances on is that innocent citizens are being tortured. That's why I believe that a lot of Congress does not know that they know about directed energy weapon systems, but they don't know that they're being used to destroy families, American families, and my brain is being destroyed as we speak. As this video plays on, as this video goes, and I just want to keep making this point, I'm being hit with directed energy weapon systems and neuro weapons, being experimented on. So this is one of the dark projects, these illegal activities that Kevin Shipp is talking about. It's happening to me and targeted individuals all over the world as we speak, and it doesn't stop. It's 24 hours a day. It goes on and on and on. And they never stop. I think they're going to stop soon. I have hope that we can bring this to an end, that some of this can be brought out to light. That's also another thing Kevin Shipp says that we might not get to in this video. He says that, these agencies, the military, the CIA in particular, is like a cockroach. They hate light. They scurry away in the light. So it's one of the most important things, and I've stressed it, and other target individuals have expressed it, that bringing this out into the light is the best thing that we can do. And it's the best thing that we can do to help some of those other things that we've got going, like individual cases, class action suits, maybe a Senate investigative hearing on exactly this program, not just the microwaves in Cuba or anything like that, but specifically the torture of United States citizens. The more we bring it out into the light, the better chance that we're going to have at those big things happening. So let's play a couple more minutes of it, and then I'm going to close it out, guys.
I'll show you some of those later. And they block Congress, as I mentioned, using the state secrets privilege. How do they control the White House? They blindfold the president. They've engaged in operations the president was not even aware of, perhaps sometimes intentionally. They've manipulated the president. Example is the false intelligence that led to the Iraq War, as I mentioned, and they influenced the president's reelection. As the quote from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer indicated, the shadow government can influence a president's reelection. You better play by our rules, or we're going to work against you, and we're going to ensure that you're not reelected. In the case of Donald Trump, from John Brennan to Director Clapper to Mike, Assistant Acting Director of the CIA, Mike Morrell, and on and on and on down through the shadow government leaders, they have all come out against Donald Trump and worked with the Russia Gate narrative to try to remove him from office. This is the shadow government trying to remove an elected president, elected by the majority of the people through the democratic electoral process and the electoral college, and the shadow government is trying to remove this president through things like the false dossier that one John McCain got from a source paid for by the Democratic Party, and then leaked that to John Brennan, who then leaked it to the press as if it was intelligence. This is heinous. I did 20 years of work in the CIA and then with the Department of State. I have never, ever seen this happen with any president before. But then again, there's never been a president who stated that he was going to look into the JFK assassination, 9/11, and other things. This is unprecedented. Control of the judiciary, I mentioned the secret FISA court, which is a new secret Supreme Court, and use of the state's secret privilege, coercing judges to rubber stamp these cases. Next slide, please. Tyranny of secrecy. The CIA, if you want to conceal it, just classify it. I'll give you some examples. Congress demanded the torture report, that the CIA release what they were engaged in torture. If you look above Daryl Issa there, you can see what the CIA provided. This is the torture report information that the CIA.
So if like Congress or a certain case asks for, information, the CIA is like, sure, we'll comply. And then they give a report that's just blacked out with a few words that they can see. So that's how the CIA complies with giving important information for court cases or, to Congress about things that are, detrimental to the populace of this country. They're like, yeah, we'll give you the information. And they just give a big blacked out version of it. So they don't really give information. It's a good metaphor for the kind of rules that the CIA and other agencies like this are going by. It's like, yeah, we'll comply, we're doing the right thing, and then not at all. They're just completely doing something that's just crazy, and it's not giving information out, or they're not doing the right thing, but they're like, well, we're the CIA, we can just make up reality, as we go. So, and other agencies too. So I don't want to just say just the CIA, but like he says, and with my research, I believe this. I think that the CIA is the central node to all this evil, to all the black programs and illegal operations. I think they are the brainchild, kind of, the gun and the CIA. That's where my research has led me.
They provided to Congress. See any problems there? You can't even read it. It's totally blacked out. Now, if you look down at Congressman Issa, when Congress, in investigation, demanded the information on Fast and Furious, running guns to drug cartels across the border,
the whole thing's blacked out.
You can see Mr. Issa holding up. This is the document that they released to Congress for their examination. Can you see a problem with that? Now, the 9/11 report is supposed to be transparent, so the American people, in your upper right-hand corner, so the American people could know what happened in 9/11, and frankly, we don't in a large way, because a criminal investigation was never done. If one is done, you get an entirely different picture. But 28 pages of the so-called transparent 9/11 report, you can see it right there. They've been blacked out. George W. Bush ordered that that information in there be blacked out. Indications are that was Saudi Arabia's connection to 9/11. Saudi Arabia is tied at the hip with the CIA and our intelligence services, and most conjectures I've seen by some of the congressmen involved, they think that's what that was. So this is how they do it. This is the modus operandi. If the CIA wants to conceal something from Congress, Congress demands, through their power of the oversight committees, They demand information. Well, you can see what they get. They get documents blacked out. Nobody can stop them. Nobody challenges them because they know they don't have the authority to stop the CIA, and no one can come back and demand that they take the blackouts off this stuff. This is ultimate power that the CIA has. It is absolute tyranny. Next slide.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
So the big question is, we hear all the time,
We'll go through
if this is going on, if the shadow government and these agencies are violating the Constitution in such a large capacity, why is no one speaking out against it? Why is no one coming out and quote unquote blowing the whistle? And what they're trying to convey is, well, if no one's coming out against it, then it must not exist. Well, I'm going to show you why no one is coming out against it. There is a complex, organized, well thought out, instituted program that's been there since 1950 to silence anybody who even dares come out and reveal some of these programs. Let's get into that a little bit. I have been in this system. I come from the belly of the beast. I've seen it used. They try to use it on me. So let's get into that. Next slide, please. Shadow government's war on whistleblowers. Yeah, we're going to have to, Eric, if you can bring up the sub bullets. If not, I'll have to talk to it. Looks like it's not coming up. Yeah, if you can jump back one. All right, go back to the slide if you can. Let's just talk about, I'll just talk to this. The shadow government war on whistleblowers. It has a well-refined, perfected system to shut up whistleblowers who try to reveal any of this information. There is a system of personal destruction, and I'll go into that in detail here in a moment, that will destroy the person before they even come out and try to get to the Congress or Senate. If you remember, the 2012 Congress passed the 2012 Whistleblower Protection Act, claiming that whistleblowers in the government are now protected. Well, if you read, most people don't read down in that act. They find out if you read down that any employee that has access to any classified government information, including confidential or sensitive, any employee that has access to classified information, CIA information, is not covered by the 2012 Whistleblower Protection Act. Then Obama went further as a reform, and again, whenever that word is used, you got to watch it. Obama came out with the 2014 Whistleblower Enhancement Protection Act, claiming that intelligence employees now have the protected ability to blow the whistle if they see something go on within the intelligence agency. If you read down in that one, you find out this, that the only way that an intelligence employee can blow the whistle is if they are actually still sitting in that position, still working on the case that they're blowing the whistle on inside that organization, which means they are right in there in the personal system of destruction, right where they want them, right where they can silence them. And that was intentionally put in this 2014 Enhancement Protection Act. So that's no protection of whistleblowers whatsoever. And of course, if the employee takes the case far and is successful, bypassing all of that, they'll simply invoke the state secret privilege, shut the case down, and threaten that employee with prison if he talks about that case to anyone. Okay, next slide. All right, now I put this in there. How does he know? How do I know what I'm talking about? And I put some of this in the book for two reasons. Number one, so the CIA could not say I never worked there, which they tried to do. And number two, to silence.
Okay, guys, this video is going pretty long. I thought I was gonna be able to play all of it. You know, I might in another video go through the personal things that Kevin Shipp went through. He wrote a book called From the Company of Shadows, which tells a lot about this, but he had to redact a lot of the personal attacks on his family, like the personal poisoning of his family. He said that his children had nightmares and stuff like that, and his wife's gums were bleeding, and she had bruises all over her body. I think that they were subject to directed energy weapon attacks as part of their targeting. He also said they hacked into his phone. They hack into his phone a lot. So there's a lot of important information on the personal targeting of Kevin Shipp when he tried to come out with some information. But I'm going to go ahead and stop it there because I've got to use the bathroom, and my attackers are they're really on my head right now. So I may go through some of that on that. There's a lot of other information I want to get through about, the stuff that I was talking about before, directed energy weapon, directed energy professional society, and some other dots that I wanted to connect. And I really want to get into some videos on gang stalking and letting people know why gang stalking runs parallel to this experimentation program to discredit us, to add trauma because it's trauma-based behavioral control, to keep us isolated, so that we can be experimental. There's many, many different reasons why gang stalking runs in conjunction with this, and there's just independent reasons that gang stalking exists or community policing because it feeds the surveillance state, it feeds DHS fusion centers and InfraGard money. And then they can, start surveilling everybody. They can have excuses to surveil everybody. So I really want to start making some of those connections. But I'm going to go ahead and end this one, guys. I love you guys. I hope y'all are finding some peace out there. There's a lot of stuff that I want. I know I've made defense videos and videos on gang stalking, but I want to just keep putting the information out there, keep churning it out there, and then any videos that I see that like really, really pertain to what we're going through and that we need to know about and that we can connect. This is connected directly to targeted individuals and targeted individuals, directed energy weapon systems, and neuroweaponry being used on survivors of non-consensual experimentation. That how this whole web and structure of the military-industrial complex is set up is very, very crucial to understand what is happening to us and who's doing it. So, all right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end this one. Maybe I might make another video and I might go through some of the things that he talks about in his personal targeting. It might have to wait for a later video. There's so much stuff that I want to get through, so much information right in front of our faces, guys, and we got to just constantly keep putting that out, putting that out, putting that out so people can see it. And we can build a social media storm, and also put it in flyers and things like that. And letters to congressmen and all the stuff that's going on right now. But all right, guys, I'm going to wrap this one up. I love you guys. More to come. And I might not wait till I feel good, to make these videos. I might just sometimes do it and just get the information out and just do the best I can. So I hope this was helpful to you guys out there, especially to you survivors of non-consensual human experimentation. But I hope that it's been helpful also to some people who are not directly targeted with directed energy weapon systems, and this maybe opened your eyes on how corrupt things have gotten to where they are torturing and murdering individual citizens in our country, for money, to advance the technology, to advance neuroweaponry and everything like that. Experimentation on how trauma affects the nervous system and the brain, and how you can control and push people's belief systems. I hope that this is kind of maybe open y'all's eyes a little bit more, and that's what we've all got to do. Not just survivors of non-consensual experimentation, but anybody else who sees how corrupt things are in our country, in our world. We've got to just keep putting information out, keep waking people up. And it's happening, guys, and we can quicken it. We can quicken the process. All right. So I love you guys. God bless everyone. And I'll probably make a video. I'll probably make another video really soon because there's a lot more information that I want to put out. But I love you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.